call meeting to order this evening. We'll start. We have two meetings tonight. Our regular meeting, committee of the whole. We're going to start with our regular meeting. So stand, join me with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Prior to our meeting this evening, the board did meet in executive session to discuss legal and personnel matters. So we need item 2.03, approval to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting tonight.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gogler, second by Mr. McKee. Questions or discussions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it and so moved. My apologies. I'll keep the microphone closer now. 3.01 Superintendent's Report. Mr. Bigger.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. I just want to thank the staff for a great year and everybody who participated in graduation and helped out. It's always nice to come to the ending, culminating events and enjoy those celebrations because we start again next year and work towards those celebrations again. Special thanks to all the staff helping with professional development this week. So we have those additional in-service days because of the hour-day requirement change at the state level. So, excuse me, we didn't make up the snow days, but we added professional development. So thanks to everybody who planned and organized that. I did have a chance to meet with 15 retirees this past week to reflect on their tenure in the profession. We talked about their fondest memory, their funniest memory, the strength of the school district, and something I need to fix. And so it affirmed a lot of things that you are seeing in the survey results about the areas to fix, but also the wonderful insight into the staff in the buildings. And really the people make the big difference. I mean, everyone spoke about their colleague, their co-teacher, their administrator, their supervisor, the custodian, the cafeteria worker. And it was nice just to talk to them for about an hour and a half. They enjoyed the breakfast, they enjoyed the time as well. And we also found out some retirement plans that were pretty interesting. A lot of travel. So specifically, we're working on a few essential conditions in the system, in the district right now with the 25-26 budget. And then we're going to start developing those systems this fall. For example, this will include freeing up head teachers from teaching to focus on student behavior with PBIS plans, that's Positive Behavior Intervention System. We're really working on those 6 survey results that are very similar. So we're going to work very hard to approach each one of those and try to improve those systems. So that's one example with student behavior. The other, potentially 3 additional school counselors, and then additional intervention staff. So as we build the 25-26 budget, that'll start early in the fall. Again, 25-26, not 24-25. 25-26, you'll start to see those items emerge from the survey results to the actual budget in 25-26. In the short term, that's long term, at the last meeting we approved the iPads for the high school. This also allowed us to respond and repurpose the functioning of our Chromebooks K-8. So a lot of schools really rushed out technology due to COVID. So I do give a lot of credit to Christine Wogemuth and Mark Long for organizing a task force and organizing people to do a reset. We really didn't mention that last week, but I wanted to highlight them. We are going to keep our Chromebooks K-8 in the school buildings next year. They will not go home. We'll reevaluate that at the end of the year. And so I failed to mention that, but I wanted you and the public to know that we will keep the Chromebooks K-8 in the buildings. 9 through 12 iPads will still go home. So that does a whole bunch of things around insurance and fees that we don't need in the elementary and middle schools, but we will do some collections in the high school. So I think it was a nice pause, reset, calm down a little bit, and balance the use of technology in the classroom versus some of the overuse that we got used to during the COVID days. So in some ways, we're taking a step back. There is a rule out there for homework for the old school people like me. 10 minutes times age equal the amount of homework that you were to give a child. So if you were 6, 60 minutes. If you're 12, 120, 18, 3 hours. We'd like to apply the same concept to screen time. So when you think about moving forward with the school district, we have a part to own in that. So if you're 12 years old, how about no more than 2 hours of screen time between your phone, your computer and technology in the school, and then anything at the home time as well. So those are some guiding principles around technology, and I'm very pleased that the task force really uncovered a lot of these topics for us moving forward. So while we did approve iPads, I wanted you to know the context of all those changes for the public and the board. So I do want to thank that task force. The last item related to the budget, and certainly Tammy and you all will talk about a little bit more, I do want to thank the administrative staff and the support team for giving narratives to the budget this year. So it was a heavy lift. When you see the budget, you're going to see descriptive narratives, and we'll continue to grow the narratives in the budget into staffing. Right now, the narratives are around stuff, but not necessarily staff. And the intent of those narratives is to tell a storyline of how the budget's changed. You can see how the numbers change, but you don't necessarily see how the program changes. And we're going to start writing that down in the narrative in the budget. Last but not least, if and when you approve the budget tonight, the 4% tax increase for the 17,000 residents who get a homestead farmstead reduction out of the 30,000 tax bills will be offset by the increase in the homestead farmstead. So the average home value in Chambersburg will see an actual decrease by $12. So the increase of 4% is offset by the homestead farmstead increase, which gives a decrease by about $12. So there's certainly a scale. If you have a very expensive home, the increase won't be a whole lot, and certainly down the scale. So just wanted to point that out. I think we missed that in our conversations, but I wanted to point that out for the public. That concludes my very long report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bigger. Similar thought, just like to congratulate all of our graduates as we had successful graduation week last week. Weather cooperated, a lot of happy students, happy families. I always call it the high point of the school board director's year when you get to go to graduation. Unfortunately, I had a work commitment that prevented me from making it Thursday night, but that's my loss, and it is what it is. But I'd just like to congratulate the graduates, those going on for further education, wish them well. Maybe those going to service or those going to the workforce. But eventually, all 700 plus or minus graduates between the two high schools, I just can't wait till they all become full-time taxpayers, because old people like me need all the help we can get with my Social Security contributions. So congratulations to all the students and their families. It's a milestone and much success. To the other students, just wish them a happy, safe summer, and love to see everyone back in school when we come back here in the hot days at the end of summer. The other part of that, and I mentioned this a month ago, I think, you know, as we just talked about the students and they go off into, you know, summer vacation and pool, vacation, beach, whatever. I think of the days when I got summers off, and wow, what a joy. But when I think about the staff, and especially the administration staff who work all summer, they really start ramping up. And, you know, the end of the year is anything short of summer vacation for administration. And then by August 1, it becomes full speed ahead. In the past 7 months, I've received a very good understanding of what administration responsibilities are from a different perspective. And it's daunting what they have to go through. The end of the year, the stresses, the pressures, the race to the end. It's anything but a race. It's a downright uphill climb. And now they come into summer and they're do it all over again, getting ready for next year. So hats off to our administrators, and hopefully under Chris's leadership and his encouragement that they use vacation day, that they do take some time off and enjoy their summer a little bit. But they can't have the whole summer off, unfortunately. With that, concludes my comments. 5.01 is privilege of the floor. Looking at the sign-in sheet, no one marked that they had a comment, but that gets missed a lot of time. If there's any member of the audience who would like to make a public comment, now would be your opportunity. Okay. Moving on to the business for this regular meeting, Section 8, Finance and Facilities, 8.01, approval of the 2024-2025 Homestead Farmstead Exclusion Resolution. Mrs. Stauffer.
I'll just hit a couple of the highlights as Mr. Bigger has already alluded to this. Looking at our community, we have over 18,000 eligible homestead, farmstead properties, and again, that's out of about 30,000 taxable properties. The assessment exclusion value for the 24-25 school year is going to be $7,006. It's a market value of about $81,000. The taxpayer relief under this will be $928.25. This is an increase of $130.49 over the exclusion from 23-24. And there's two primary drivers there. One, if you recall, we did get an increase from the state gaming money this year, and we are using about $500,000 from the committed fund balance to assist with that. So the median value of the properties for this current year is around just under $250,000, and then the average is $270,000. There are a number of properties, 923, that where 100% of the exclusion covers their tax obligation.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the 2024-2025 Homestead Farmstead exclusion?
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Dr. Diller, second by Mrs. Gauss. Any questions or discussions? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved. Item 8.02, approval of the 24-25 budget resolution. Mrs. Stauffer.
Yes, this is the final budget. It has changed slightly since the proposed final budget, primarily due to a large property in Guilford Township coming onto the tax rolls. We now are anticipating revenue to be just under $187 million, with expenditures around $188 million. We are forecasting a slight, which I will say it's a slight deficit, Ms. Harbaugh. I know that number makes her a little nervous, but just around $1.4 million. This does include a $5 million budgetary reserve, with our projected assigned fund balance ending around $32 million. The budget has been prepared with a 4% tax rate, giving the millage rate, or will set the millage rate at 132.4930. I do want to just remind the board and the public that we have not included in this budget any of the governor's additionally proposed revenue. And to answer a question I think I'm sure I'm going to get, no, we are not hearing really anything at this point in time. Seeing a little bit that they're kind of still kind of jockeying around with how they're going to do it. So I don't anticipate that the state will have a budget by June 30th. I think it'll be well beyond that.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the 24-25 budget?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hayduck, second by Mr. Walker. Before we get into discussion, but Mrs. Stauffer, we'll do roll call on this.
Yes, please.
Sorry, don't want to surprise you, so I'll give you a little bit of warning.
That's fine.
But
Thank
any
you.
questions or discussions on the motion? I'll just add one comment briefly, and I'll talk about a little bit later in our discussion presentation that Mr. Fry is going to give. The 4%, the X plus Y, we started this last year, which is really a 3+1, where the 3% is basically general operating, and the 1% is a combination of, right now, it's a combination of capital reserve set aside and future debt service, and eventually, all these 1%, if subsequent boards follow suit, we're just banking revenue for a larger debt service, and we're going to start hearing more about that tonight and a lot more in the months to come. So really, it's like it's a 3% for operating and 1%, they say combination capital reserve and some additional current debt service, but a lot of future debt service. So we don't have to do a massive increase at one time to catch all of the debt service at once and avoid the wraparound financing. No other comments, discussions? Roll call, please. Mrs. Stauffer.
Dr. Diller,
Yes.
Ms. Gogler,
Yes.
Ms. Gauss,
Yes.
Ms. Harbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Haydock,
Yes.
Mr. McKee,
Yes.
Mr. Norcross,
Yes.
Mr. Raber,
Yes.
and Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we're going to adjourn our regular meeting for this evening, and we will go right into our committee of the whole meeting. Already discussed the executive session previously, so we don't need to redo that. Board announcements and recognition.
Not at this time.
Okay. Presentations, 4.01. Mrs. Lynch.
Just let me preface that. Thanks, Angie, for coming. From moving forward, I think we've agreed that we're going to do an annual report once a year for the foundation. That way you can see the updates at the foundation, and you can see all the work that they're doing for the school district. So this is the plan moving forward versus regular, I think, monthly attendance before. So it's once a month or once a year.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's great to be back and see our smiling faces and be here with you this evening to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on with the Education Foundation over the last year. So just some quick highlights. Just in case there are any questions, our mission did not change over the last year. So same mission going back to 2018 when our mission changed to reflect an ability to fund career development activities. And that's been also wrapped around and been a very deep part of our updated strategic plan, which was most recently updated in 2023. So some of the things that we wanted to do in terms of our mission and sharing that mission out with our staff and with the community is we did a few things that were new this year in terms of marketing. So the timing of this just worked out perfectly. We wanted to do something with our new contact information out to all of the buildings. So all of our board members were very gracious and delivered cookie trays with a really cool two-sided sticker that could be placed in their faculty rooms or anywhere in the main office that had all of our information with an appreciative message. So we were able to do that to every academic building in the district. One of the other things that we did, we were tossing around the idea of using the raising dough and talking about dough. And we had a couple folks last summer who were jokingly saying, we keep talking about all these great summer camps that are out in the community. What about a fun camp for adults that we could use as a fundraiser? So our partners at Fox's Pizza Den agreed to do a pizza camp for us. So we actually sold out, and we raised a few $100s that night. But more importantly, about half of the folks that attended that night had never had any connection or involvement with the foundation. So that was kind of a cool thing. So we will be doing that again sometime this summer, date to be determined, but I'll make sure that you all receive an invitation to that via email. Another thing that we did this year that was brand new, again, spreading the love, in celebration of Principal Appreciation Month, although we ended up doing it November 1st because that date just worked best in terms of when all the folks were together, that we had some board members, Lee Harder was also involved, but was not in the photograph, came in and provided a buffet breakfast to all the administrators and to all the principals that were here, and that was a nice exchange. I think the principals felt that sense of connection with the foundation and recognized that even though they don't see our faces every day, that we're still very much involved with one another. I really like this clicker, by the way. So rebranding was where we spent most of our time October 2023. So in keeping with best practices, one of the things that our marketing team of our foundation board members were looking at was if we are changing our email and our web address and all of our other contact information, is it time to revisit a name change? We've revisited it about every year since 2014, and the best practice is not to name yourself after a mascot, which many education foundations do, and not name yourself after a physical place, but to name yourself about the work and a connection with the district. So the rebranding, our team came up with the Chambersburg Area Education Foundation, and we also, those of you may remember, our logo was back from, I think, 2004. It was an apple on some books, and our younger scholarship recipients would say, but your logo really doesn't say anything about what you do because you don't buy textbooks. So that was one of the other things that we took a look at. And I think that we've done a pretty good job with expanding that out into the community. And you're going to see a couple new things in the next couple months where you're going to see this new logo in a very out there in the community sort of way. So our scholarship program, of course, we've been a scholarship organization since our inception. This year I managed nearly 500 applications, and the final wrap-up of that, we provided 62 scholarships. We had 2 scholarships that we did not have a recipient due to the fact that we didn't have an eligible student apply. And the total of that was $121,000 for Chambersburg students. So one of the things that we wanted to do this year was to make sure that we continued the partnership in both Cassius and CMS, and also to make sure that we continued to spread that information out with the parents. So we did 17 presentations in our high schools, and then we did 2 online presentations that were through Google Meet for students and their families. And we did have some challenges, and when I say we, I mean we as a nation with FAFSA this year, for those of you who may not be involved in the college application process and financial aid, the brand new FAFSA software essentially didn't work, and the individual that was responsible for that is no longer in that role. So we had to extend our deadline multiple times, and many of the colleges that the students will be attending did the same. So the time frame was a little different this year, but I think with our partners, between our teaching faculty and school counselors, we were still able to have a really solid program this year, even though initially we saw that we were having fewer students apply. Also, just that our board feels very strongly about continuing the work that we're doing as far as educational programming. So 5 years ago, it usually works out to be every 5 years, we bring Dr. Peggy Jennings to Chambersburg. She is, has a private consulting company, and her work, she's a retired school counselor, has a doctorate in education administration, and the work that she does is helping students connect in ways with a college environment that is both affordable to them and meets their academic needs. So she did a great presentation for us. We've always had an issue with students not being able to come to this nighttime program because they don't have transportation. So we gave it a try, and we did it downtown at Coyle Free Library, and we had some students who were able to attend because they walked. So that was a new shift for us that we were excited to see. We also had an online session here at the end of May it was really essentially for juniors, and similar to what you might think of as like a junior jumpstart program, and we had 30 families that signed up for that. So that was also another way for us to help serve as a resource to walk folks through the college process. So some other sponsorships. This is not new. I just got better pictures this year. For about the last 10 years, we've sponsored the Battle of the Brains. For those of you who haven't heard about it, it's a really cool thing. The gifted department brings 100 students from the gifted program, and some of them are also allowed to bring a friend. And it's kind of like an Olympics of sorts. So we have students for half a day at Cassius in the cafeteria. So We had 100 students. They had, I think, 25 parent volunteers. They had a lot of student volunteers as well. And it takes a lot of their time and effort. So we really get to see the end result, the thank you cards from the students and the quotes, but it's really a ton of work. So when I say we sponsor this, I don't want to convey that we are actually doing the work. I'm ordering the shirts and getting the gift cards and ordering the pizza. But it's a great partnership, and the students certainly appreciate it. And I've actually had some parents and some community members that saw the picture on social media that want to order a Battle of the Brains t-shirt. So if any of you are interested, shoot me an email sometime. In terms of professional development this year, I don't attend the National Education Foundation every other year is my professional development plan. But this year was my year to attend, and I was actually selected to serve as one of the TED Talk presenters, and my topic was board development. So that was an interesting experience. I loved just being with 400 of my peers throughout the country, and it was 4 days of intense. I got all the CEUs that I need for my CFRE in 4 days, so that was great. And then our annual golf outing, this year it was our 30th, so that was pretty exciting. We sold out, and we had a wait list. And I think Mr. Bigger, Mr. Whitman seemed to enjoy themselves, but they also thank you both for being a part of it, giving remarks, and just kind of being that positive partner there at our event. So the $30,000 that we raised, that will be in addition to our student and teacher grant program next year. Next year, that event will be held on May the 5th. So back in 2014, the foundation board had a goal of, education foundations were usually 20 to 25 years behind the collegiate environment, right? Colleges have been doing this, many of them for over 100 years. And one of the items was, we don't do anything to steward our donors by giving them an opportunity to meet and greet and spend an evening with their student recipient. So we've been planning and thinking it through and looking at what some of the other education foundations do. And so this year we were able to roll out our Celebration of Excellence. Wilson College served as our host. They were a great partner. They charged us only for the food. So not for the room rental, not for the custodial services, not for the linens, tables, and chairs. A little plug for Wilson. They were really wonderful hosts for us. And it also, I think, was good for students to have that evening on a college campus, because many of them said to me after, this isn't so scary, is it? No, it's a place with buildings. You'll have a great experience. So that was a great night, I think, for all those who were in attendance. Thank you to Mr. Bigger for speaking. And also just wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Liz Holtree, who is one of our teachers at Cassius. She's also a former scholarship recipient, so she spoke. It kind of brought everything together. She talked about her experience as a scholarship recipient, going to Penn State, studying agriculture, knowing that the Hellman family cared enough about her and believed in her to provide that scholarship. And then we also were able to use the hanging baskets that our FFA students grew in the greenhouse, and the lighting had been funded by the foundation a number of years ago. We used those for the centerpieces, and she got to talk about how those baskets started as seeds, and then they were something very beautiful that could be taken as a gift for those who were in attendance. So she did a great job, and I think she really got folks thinking about the beauty of philanthropy. So next year's Celebration of Excellence has already been scheduled, and that will be on May the 8th. And you can see that we had a pretty full crowd. We had 207 people who attended that evening. So our external grants, we had some grants that we received the funding after July 1st that I think we had already talked about last academic year. So we placed those orders July and August. Here is Dr. Van Ardsdale with the materials that we purchased for Scotland. So some interesting updates for our foundation grant program. We have retooled that. It used to be 2 application processes, 2 deadlines per year. Some years it was specific to a curricular area. Some years it was wide open. We've determined, I should say the board's determined, that they want it to be, they'll be willing to review an application for all curricular areas, and this is, Mr. Biggers approved this. The other problem that we saw was that sometimes our deadlines don't work for our teachers' deadlines. So this coming year, it will be a rolling deadline. So any teacher that submits something by the 1st of the month, their grant application will be reviewed that month, and they will be notified before the end of the month. Many grant applications will also be accepted for STEM Club support for all buildings, and that will be in the same fashion. And we do not fund, as a reminder, transportation salaries or at this time, computers. So the Trojans Care Fund, that's of course an ongoing fund. I know you all appreciate hearing about this and meeting these needs for our students. I didn't include any figures on the slide because between the time that I submitted this Monday morning and this evening at 7 o'clock, we've actually had some increases, both in terms of funds raised and in terms of the resources that have been provided to students. So since the fund's inception, we've raised over $100,000, going back to 2013. Some of that is the interest on the investment account. Some of that has been contributed by student government, many private donations, grants. We had a number of professional organizations and service organizations. We've had student initiatives who've contributed, such as the FBLA, the Student Store. So far this year, as of Monday morning, we had contributed $5,500 in support to Chambersburg students. Between 10 a.m. Monday and 7 o'clock tonight, we've had another $2,000 in requests. So every time, this fund is fluid, of course, but it depends on the circumstances that our students are dealing with. And we had 2 house fires within a couple days that have displaced many, many families. And so we're working, we have a cap of $500 per student for the Trojans Care Fund, but I have made a number of calls as well to get some other, usually when I know that we're over that $500 per student, I have a Rolodex of folks that, I don't give specifics, but that we put them in touch with school personnel to help as well. So we've had a really phenomenal year financially. We've opened 5 new endowed funds this year that brings our total to 26. Just as a point of reference, we're required to collect $15,000 before we can identify a segregated investment account for our donors. Some of these funds include scholarships, special projects, such as the Trojans Care Fund, the Stevens Fund. This does not include our third-party trusts. We have a third-party trust at ACMB, one at BNY Mellon, and one at F&M Trust. Which brings me to our total assets. We have over $3,650,000. This does not include one of our third-party trusts, which would then put us over the $4 million mark, which is the first time we've ever hit that figure. So we have 4 other individuals that have identified the foundation as the recipient of the full value of their estate upon their death. So we love building relationships with people to be able to do that. I really don't like the end result, but it's folks who really care about kids and who care about the Chambersburg community. So I think we'll be, we're poised for a very successful future. So, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I have one question, Angie, if I may. I'm just curious about the 2 scholarships that someone walked away from. They left them on the table, and out of the hundreds of graduating seniors, not all were going to college, but quite a few. And do you figure that the requirements were so specific, or people just simply didn't take advantage of it?
Unfortunately, they just didn't take advantage of it. This is, every year we have at least one. A month before the deadline, I run a report and I send it out with the hyperlinks to the application to all the senior counselors and let them know, I don't have anybody for this scholarship, this scholarship, this scholarship. If you're working with students and you know that that's specific to their interest, can you please push that out? And they usually do a really good job of helping to share those opportunities. But yeah, there are just some that we just don't have, students just don't apply. I will tell you that usually the ones that students don't apply to are the ones that require the essay. Yeah, which I think is kind of to be expected, yeah. But our scholarships range in between $1,000 and this year our largest was $12,500. That was for Rotary, so, yeah. Thank you.
Mrs. Lynch, there was one number, it said 121,000 in scholarships. How about the total in grants that were dispersed?
We did not do a traditional teacher grant program this year because we wanted to give it a year, and we met with Mr. Bigger. So I didn't want to report in a duplicated way. So if you look at your grant report from last June's meeting, so it would have been $25,000 from Green Township, $40,000 from the impact grant, and then I think we had $2,500 from the Alexander Stewart Trust. So those were our three that were outside grants.
But disbursements from the foundation, none of the assets from the foundation are used for grants? They're all
Yes,
just
sir, they are.
Okay,
Yes,
that
sir,
was
they
my
are.
number. It's
Yes.
121,000 in foundation dollars for scholarships. How many foundation dollars in grants?
Okay. This year only, we did not provide teacher grants. And that we met with Mr. Bigger in the fall, and we discussed that we needed to give it a year and see what we wanted to do moving forward in terms of, each administration has changed how they find that priority. Like some individuals, some superintendents have said, I want it 100% of it to go to physical education and health because, the PD requirements changed. So, and there were no district resources to be able to make those purchases. So it really depends on the administration and what those priorities are. It actually was Mr. Bigger's suggestion that moving forward, that we do the STEM startup grants. So that will be new.
Okay. Is that, when I see, so 3.6 million in assets and $121,000 dispersed.
That's a
Seems
great
like a low
question.
percentage, or maybe that's the norm. I don't know.
Well, it is the norm.
Okay.
But it is a great question, and that's a good point. I should have included that in the slide. So 95% of our assets are restricted by the donor. So what that means is we only have the authority to spend the interest on the investment. Most nonprofits operate that way. So, and that's donor driven. I mean, I think out of all of our 26, I think I only have 4 that we can dip below into the principal.
Thank you.
How much is coming in on the interest, would you say?
There's no one answer for that. It depends on how the investments are invested. And that's all donor driven. So some of the donors wanted to be slow growth and interest. I have one that is not slow growth and interest. I have one that's very conservative. And then we have no ability to discuss with our third-party trusts. So that's set by BNY Mellon, ACNB, and F&M Trust. Is there a concern that we aren't providing enough resources back to the district?
No.
I just didn't know what the norm was.
Okay. Well,
I was curious.
those are good questions. So if you need more information, I'd be happy to put something together for you.
Yeah, that would,
Yeah.
I'm just, as I'm sitting here and after hearing hearing that question. I just thought, well, how much comes in interest a year that you even have to use? That's
Right.
all I'm asking.
Right. Well,
It's
and
not-
that is what we can kind of control, if you will, like the
Right, right.
reports that we receive. It's anywhere depending on the year. Some years it's only 5.5 if it's it's a very slow year, but we usually get anywhere between 8.5 to 11.5% return on our investment. So it's pretty good.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
You said that restricted funds.
Yes.
So does that mean that whoever the donor is, they say it can only be used for this specific genre of schooling or like this specific thing at the school? I know you can't get into like the exact details,
Oh,
but
sure.
could you give maybe a general example?
Oh, absolutely. That's great. So we have a new investment account this year that was set up by the Cascia Student Government, and they call it the Go Trojan Scholarship. So this coming year will be the first year that we will have sufficient interest to be able to provide that. So within the application and the scholarship agreement, the students identified that they wanted it to be a student that was working in their future pursuits of either social work, human services, or political science. So as long as the student that applies is studying and it is accepted into a program of those 3 areas, they would be eligible to receive that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we have some that are also related to healthcare. We have some that are related to probably our largest. We have 3 that are related to engineering. We have, let's see, going down through my mind on our profit and loss statement. So we have,
You have 2 that are alumni.
right, so the class, that's a great one, thank you for putting that out. The class of 1964, the student recipient has to be a direct relative of a classmate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we've had some that are either related to alumni or, like for instance, the Kish Miller Family Scholarship Endowment. That student has to go to Shippensburg University, and they have to be a first-generation college student. So when I sit down and meet with the donors, the first thing that we discuss is, what is your dream, and how do you want to use these funds to change someone's life? And most of the time, people were drawn to scholarships because it meant their college experience meant something to them, and maybe they had a financial challenge themselves. We have some individuals that will say, okay, we don't really have, I have one person I'm working with right now who said, I don't care how you use the money. I just wanted to go to a student, actually 2 students that have been involved, who are good kids, minimum GPA of like 3.0, and that they have a higher need and maybe some unmet needs. So that an example of that might be a student they have to use their parents' tax information on their FAFSA to get their student aid index. But what if their parents say, I'm not helping you? And we do have quite a few students who are in that situation. So, we try to work with the donor and have them identify what really means something to them. And then we have to firm that up and put that into the scholarship agreement. Because my thought is, God forbid, if I step off a curb and I get hit by a bus, somebody needs to slip right into my computer and sit at my chair and know how all of these funds legally have to be spent. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for the hospitality. I appreciate it. It's good seeing everybody again. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 4.03, feasibility study update. Crabtree, Rohrball and Associates.
Thank you. Tonight again. There we go. Thank you. So tonight, I think speaking with Mr. Bigger and the administrative team, what we wanted to do is actually show you a little bit of the narrative of the thought process between the administrative team in terms of the types of questions that we're asking, the information that they're sharing as we start to shape the options. And if you recall, one of the previous presentations I made, at this point, we're now starting to dabble in several of the categories because they're also interrelated. So our first slide tonight is where we ended at our last presentation. We still feel like we're on track for a fall completion, but we're really starting to zero in on 2 or 3 of these components as they relate very closely to each other, and that is the educational program. The administrative team has been giving us guidance on their thought process. We're talking a little bit more about the facilities themselves. I spent the afternoon with Mark, facilities, Matt, and Kurt to walk through CAM South, because we're starting to think about, as we deliberate about options, we're starting to think about how would this building transition to a different grade configuration, and what would it take to do that? So there's the cost side, and that's really the heart of the kind of the option development. So this is the one slide that we had shared. We're getting a couple more check marks of what we've completed, but now you'll see this green field around all 3 of these items, as I just mentioned, because they're so related to one another. The program and the facility, the grade realignment, are in fact the options, the essence of the options themselves. So as we continue forward, I think tonight what we're going to show you a little bit is about the exchange of the questions and all the things that are essentially on the table. So Fred and I are going to hand back and forth.
Thank you. So we asked the district, what is your educational vision? What is it about your current program that you want to keep, you want to change? Are there things that you want to add? Are there programs that have reached the end of their life and you want to simply do away with them? We got wonderful answers from the administrative team, from the superintendent, on how they envision the educational program coming together. And they're not starting with specific ideas and working backwards, but broad concepts, and then within those broad concepts, how will the buildings really support that is what Crabtree is looking at. So you've seen these 2 graphics. They were actually directly from the superintendent's report and corresponded right with. We asked the question, he said, oh, by the way, here this is. So our response as a result of having conversations about that is that we are continuing every other week talking with the administrative team about their vision and their programs. We're starting to collect data sets on the size of renovations and the cost of just simply keeping a building and bringing it up to its current code compliance and those kinds of things. So it's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that really rely on one another. So we're organizing them into data sets.
So again, as we show you this narrative, it's really kind of the segue into the options themselves. Are we looking at how does a program apply to each one of these buildings? And it's amazing that taking, I'll use CAM South as an example, looking at it as an elementary building, a 5-6 or 6-7-8 or 7-8, they're very different building organizational models. So we're trying to understand what's the investment, what would it take to accomplish that? Is there another option, if you will, that would be more cost effective? What are the demographic input by making that, building a particular grade alignment? How does that affect transportation and so forth? And again, here is part of the presentation superintendent has shared previously that in some aspects we joke about, I feel like we're a little bit behind and you're a little bit ahead and then we're a little bit ahead and you're a little bit behind, which is great because ultimately our objective now is as we move to, we need to start to develop concepts that are test fits, that we are putting cost to each of these models because ultimately what we want to do is evaluate the merits of each of these options. So again, the responses from the district has been able to allow us to factor all of these issues, that every option we're looking at what is the most, what is the highest operational efficiency. and not from a building usage as a utility. We're talking about everything operationally. Utilities, yes, but in most cases where these renovations are occurring, we're expecting that by replacing antiquated mechanical systems, you're going to see the benefit of those operational savings. But what's the smartest move in terms of staffing? How can the building be organized to be more efficient in that way? Again, we've kind of put check marks between the enrollment, working on the educational program, and today as we walked through Camp South, there was a lot of discussion about infrastructure needs. And in most cases where you haven't seen a building get a comprehensive renovation in 25 or 30 years, we're pretty much coming to the table with an expectation that all major systems will need to be replaced, because we know whatever the board decides to do, this is a long-term investment. These are 40, 50-year decisions. So, we're being very cautious of making recommendations on what makes the most sense to salvage something or what's cost prohibitive to do so. Again, because of the budget and the cost, those are kind of the analyses that we're running. There's an impact to all these options too with the schedule. When you talk about renovating a fully occupied building versus new, there's an impact to students, staff, and construction costs. Renovations that have very little opportunity to have swing space, we're moving kids constantly, or looking at modulars, which has a cost associated to it. So the schedule has a couple of components in terms of the cost of the option in itself.
So as we're looking at all this data and kind of starting to really weave it together into a tapestry of opportunity, there are some things that are rising to the top for consideration. Strategies that can potentially work. I'm not saying that every single one can work perfectly or they're in any particular hierarchy of order, but we know that there are already some things that aren't going to work for the school district. These are things that might work for the school district given the initial numbers. You can simply maintain the status quo, bring all your buildings over time up to the proper code and keep everything the way that it is. You can begin to change your academic and support programming. Probably one of the key things of that is redistributing your special education classrooms. I know, which again, if you go back to those documents provided by the district, all these strategies kind of confirm that yes, those things are pretty much possible. You could change grade alignments. You could begin to use existing space to really hone in on a part of the curriculum where students learn to collaborate and learn how to work in the workplace properly. You can begin to consolidate potentially elementary schools in regions where enrollment is declining. When it comes to looking at again, from previous reports, you've got schools that are really tremendously underutilized, and you've got schools that are, near, if not over capacity already. So there's going to have to be some kind of adjustment in there that needs to be made. And then you can begin to use these strategies above, in combinations. So there are a couple of things that, again, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that these are things that are decided. These are things that are simply possible based on the data analysis that we have so far. And the last one of these, just to set the right tone, is there are probably others that we are about to identify but have not. But these are the ones that we're kind of running down at this point in time. So status quo, no changes. We know that's going to require renovations and additions to the buildings as needed. You are able to change the programming at the middle level or at the high school. You know already that your middle schools, at least one, needs some pretty substantial renovations to it, and you've actually gathered some money to start on that process. Option number 2 is to take your elementary schools to K-4. That really starts to begin to enhance your ability to consolidate, if that's a strategy that the district wants to use. In some of these schools that are really underutilized, when you take out 5th grade and distribute it into another grade alignment, their capacity is even less utilized than now, and then you can begin to maybe look at combining attendance zones into a single one. You could look at either consolidating one middle school and making it your 5-6 building and the other a 7-8, or you could construct a 5-6, abandon a middle school, turn the other two a 5-6, and construct a new 7-8. And again, all of these have price tags and moving pieces that you're going to have to consider. We want to give you all the tools to be able to do that. And then the last two, you go to an elementary and K2 in all your buildings. Convert one of the middle schools to an upper elementary serving all 3rd and 4th graders, the other one to serve all 5th and 6th graders, and then construct a new 7-8 building. And then the last one is the first that I started out with. There's, I'm sure, some that are going to rise to the surface. There are some on here, again, that we may run down and come back to you and say, that's really not a good idea. It's about that point in time where someone says, have you thought of this? And we want to be able to make sure that we can say, yes, we thought of that. We did not bring it forward because of X, Y, and Z. So we're running down all these opportunities, and I know if Dr. Bigger, if you want to add to any of this, then John can talk about the next steps. And
Go ahead.
Okay, so again, our next step is to really look at finalizing, and I say finalize loosely. This is a study. For the purpose of a study, that we have a grasp on what your big educational goal and vision, particularly with the special education programs, that we start to develop design concepts, which is something everyone can react to. All these charts and matrices are great, but when you see adapting this building as a 5-6, the merits of it, it's so much easier to do that, and particularly when we start putting cost to it. We'll give consideration to all of those items so that we can begin to, this next to last bullet point is really to evaluate the opportunities and challenges. And also to Dr. Witham's point, don't feel that a study, we really should look at items that even if we think it might not have merit, we do need to have an answer for the why. So if we finish this study and we're only down to 2 or 3, invariably someone will say, well, have we thought about that? We want everyone to be able to say, we did, but this is why we chose to go in this direction. And that's really how a study needs to be useful in terms of reaching out to the community to illustrate the homework that we all did, the research, and really the rationale. I mentioned a long time ago when the Department of Ed was actively reimbursing projects, the first application a district would submit was called project justification. It was the district's rationale for the cost of the project, the design, and a minimum 20-year look ahead. So that's kind of the expectations that we're proceeding with.
And I just want to thank you for helping us develop a master plan too. It's a lot more challenging to look at the whole district, and things have emerged since we said, what's the master plan for long term? Like the Coke building, I think, came up the other day. What are we doing in the long term with that? What are we doing in the long term with the Armory? So it really has pushed us to really think about our long-term direction, which has been helpful. So thanks for helping with that. And at the end of the option development, it's really beneficial for the board to have a narrowed set of options. I've seen horror stories of 12 options, and you have no choice but to debate them for hours and hours and hours. So
Thank
our
you.
goal is to get down to a couple, 2 to 3 that are manageable. That gives you 3 good choices, and then take it from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue for us to wrap up. There typically are really only 2 or 3 real major moves. There could be 12 options, but they almost always look like a little bit of the other. There's some hybrid. Well, what if we do this instead? But, back to those options, is a K4 alignment the vision that you have? That's the big move. Is there some subset or hybrid? Probably, but those 3 front runners, also, that becomes detrimental when you try to present it to the public. So that's the feedback that we'll all be soliciting and wanting to hear back from you as well. Thank you.
I have a quick question, John. So it seems like you've done this stuff a lot in many, many places. And I'm wondering, do you ever get, as you're going through the study, a sense of how much friction there will be between the vision and the existing culture? Do you kind of get a sense of that in any way? I know it might be kind of hard to quantify, but like a gut, this is going to be easy or this is going to be really, really hard?
Absolutely. You know, and I think too, if I haven't said this before, just because the architect can make it so might not make it a great idea. Sometimes capacity, you know, we talked about guiding principles. If a district is under, you know, significant enrollment pressure and it's, you know, put as many classrooms in that building as you can. But administratively, I hear the admin team saying, we don't want an experience for a K-4 building, I'll exaggerate, for 1,500 kids. I sense that friction right out of the gate. When we're talking about program and adapting it to an existing building, I'm always sensitive to what are the inefficiencies that it's going to create to execute that versus a new building. But then a new building has a different price tag. So where's the middle ground? So yeah, and I think hopefully the background of working at the district, working closely with the admin team, we're trying to make sure we know what all those sensitive issues are so that not everyone will always agree, but we want everyone to understand the why and the rationale again.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
If I could add to that, Mike, intentionally and purposely during staff presentations on the state of the district, I brought up 5, 6, 7, 8 versus 2 middle schools as a litmus test to see how people would respond to it. And I've yet to get a complaint. So I think the litmus test is, will we deliver? It's not what we will do, it's will we deliver on some promise, which is a very different response than I'm used to. So as I've socialized some of these, it's like, okay, we hear you talking, but let's see it. So I'm very excited that we're getting that type of reception with just some of our ideas.
And I think last school board meeting, I noticed on the donations that your firm donated a significant amount of money for some training, and as I was told, it's going to be training that'll help the leadership begin to move into this change. And I think that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was hoping to attend it myself, and I can't, but it looks like a great opportunity.
Just a couple comments, and first off, as the graybeard, no pun intended, sitting here, you know, for many years I've always been concerned about our feasibility studies, and the term I often use where they were always bricks and mortar. We'd have a feasibility study, and the thing would be an inch, inch and a half thick binder, glossy paper, pretty pictures, stats, but it was always bricks and mortar. So, you know, I remember Mrs. Gogler and I met with Chris many, many months ago, November, in Littlestown, actually. And he mentioned educational programming in conjunction with our feasibility study. And that's the vision, to my colleague, Mr. Haydick's point, you know, that's the vision that I think is just so refreshing for me now in my 11th year here. And the other part about vision, I just want to take a step back and, you know, give a shout out to the previous board. We were in a Buildings and Grounds Finance meeting about a year ago, August, September timeframe.
It's October.
And we were talking about a large project. And it was a great committee meeting, and the discussion, it turned into what I was calling scope creep, because there were a lot of ideas being thrown out. And again, in all my time on the board, the previous board, you know, decided, hey, let's tap the brakes here. That was a visionary moment for the previous board. Let's tap the brakes here. Let's not just go about a option 0, and I love using option 0 for status quo because I don't think I think that's very appropriate. You know, instead of doing 0 status quo, which we were going to keep the same program, just spend a whole bunch of money on an existing building and not look at programming, there were a lot of concepts thrown out at that meeting, and the board left that meeting saying, time out, let's tap the brakes, and the beginning of this process. And this is the heavy lift we've all been talking about for some time now, and it's just beginning. So I'm glad, Mr. Haydick, you mentioned vision, because again, that vision has started with the previous board that night. I think it was August, September timeframe. Mr. Bigger has brought new light to it. Crabtree, appreciate your new vision in this process, and now it's this board's turn to really continue this momentum and continue the discussions. And I just want to back up. I always hate acknowledging people because you always forget someone. But it was in that discussion in August or September when Mrs. Gogler mentioned something very similar to option one. So that's the vision that we have around this table tonight and in this room.
Well, I think there's a tendency to just want to stay with the status quo. Many of you know my history with school boards, and I can remember as a child my grandfather talking about the one-room schools, that he was a school director whenever they got rid of the one-room schools, and the resistance to that change. And you know, there's going to be resistance to change. There just always is. But as long as we can be showing that it's an improvement in the education, I think that we're going to eventually get people on board.
I just had a quick clarification to make sure that I'm understanding the one part that I see here. With all of these options, the one thing that rings true through all of them is realign attendance boundaries. And that is gonna be a recommendation regardless. And I only ask that because I've had people ask me, because I guess it gets floated out there about how things are gonna be whatever. So I'd just like to have a response to that, you know, that yes, it's something we're looking into, it's not sure, but if you're saying, and maybe you can't say that, but that's the one thing I saw through all of these, that even if we do option 0, there's gonna be some redistricting. And that's just something I'd like to have you clarify to me, so then I can then in turn answer it knowledgeably.
You know, that's something.
Take one step back.
Go ahead. Fred, you can go first, then Kurt Widman can jump in, I think, a
I
little
still
bit.
have my superintendent's sport
Yes.
jacket with me. It's got Kevlar lining on it. No, you know, the reality, we wanted to put that there every single time.
Yep.
The reality is you do not have to redistrict, but it is going to cost you an awful lot of money to keep your attendance boundaries and bring some of the buildings that have not had attention up to code, just not to move those kids. And when you're bringing a building in terms of tens of millions of dollars to bring it up to code for 40% utilization, you're probably gonna say, we gotta bring some more kids over into this building. Or you might consolidate that with another building and do something different. So the concepts are wide. But and anything that has a grade realignment, there's going to be some redistricting involved. Certainly, they'll all get together earlier and stay together longer in
And
some
that's
of
a
those
benefit.
ones. But even that's going to take some amount of redistricting to get things where they need to be. The other thing that's going to tremendously impact that we're trying to get all the pieces in the right place, as the special education programs, which is a clear desire of the district, get evenly distributed geographically, that's going to change where seats are available. That will then create a need in some places, maybe to move some kids to another school, or maybe to bring more kids into one. Right. And I think ultimately that shuffle too is going to have to do that. Mm-hmm. The number of kids that you have to move will vary greatly across those plans, and particularly how early you bring them together all at once, and then it's done. So you'll notice some of them say K to 2, K to 4, K
Right.
to 8.
Right. And like I said, I'm all for whatever's in the best interest of getting the most return on the investment.
Yeah.
Chris, you know that, everybody knows that. It's just, I have also found in dealing in different aspects in every facet of life, the sooner you let people know what might be happening, the less it is so shocking to them when it actually happens. Even if it seeps out a little bit over time, it tends to be less like putting them in the cold ice water. So when I saw that kind of permeate through all the different options, I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that that's most likely going to be happening in some facet, regardless of what option we choose.
I will also say back to that culture question and your question. I think it becomes so much harder when a district chooses to do that because they feel that's what they need to do versus, yes, we have to do that as part of a well-articulated plan to improve the educational program for our children. And I, you know, we're back at the office constantly, you know, singing the praises of Chambersburg because we say, what do you want your program to be? And we get diagrams and visions, and they're thinking about how that's going to impact moving kids around, and then we can start to do the test fits and those other kinds of things. So, you know, you're starting with in the right place with kids first, and I think even then when it does ultimately get difficult for some people to change, they're going to say, okay, but they're doing this for the right reasons.
Well, my hope is that maybe in the past there hasn't been a reason for the change. It was just like, let's see what's going on, and you know, maybe just putting out this fire and this fire and this fire. But with the comprehension and the bigger plan, I'm hoping the public especially, and you know, everyone that works in the district can all see that we're all moving towards something. And I think that culture will ultimately help, and the buy-in from the people that are here and pushing that to get us where we want to be. So hopefully that difficult time will be less difficult because we all understand where we're moving. Kurt, oh, sorry, yeah.
I think, yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Kurt, what you
Anything
got?
to add, or are you good?
No, I mean, your question, when you get asked that question, it would be, this is an exciting time right now. We want to get the educational programming right, and to do that, we're going to be doing some efficiencies throughout the district, some grade changes, some building changes, and that gives us the opportunity to realign some of the boundaries. You know, a lot of people get scared of that redistricting word. It may not be the entire district, but we do have that need. You know, one big example right now, about 3 football fields away from Stevens, those kids are going to Marion. And then just up here to 4th Street, those kids are going to New Franklin. But yet 4 or 5 blocks away is Buchanan. So we do have some wonky lines that when we end up doing this correctly, we're going to be able to fix some of these efficiencies and do what's right for the kids, and get them in the right schools, get them spread out. You know, about 1/3 of our, not quite 1/3 of the students at Fayetteville are special needs students. So we have nearly 100 students at Fayetteville in 13 or 14 self-contained classrooms are special needs. So if we can spread those out through the district as well, that's going to open up room at Fayetteville and can relieve Scotland and even Grandview a little bit, depending on what we even decide to do there. So it's an exciting time to look at all those efficiencies and getting it right for the kids.
Gotcha.
Well, we also have to remember that geographically, we are so unique in the size of our district, and we inherited that back in the 40s or whenever it was that the townships came to Chambersburg for their high school and so on. And so it's just such a unique, compared to Camp Hill, for instance, where kids walk to school for the whole district.
Right.
Or Greencastle, where
They're
all
all
the
in
schools
one.
are
It's all
in,
Yeah.
you know, campus, you know.
Well, why would the district be any different than the voting regions? Because I have to pass 2 voting precincts to go to the one I vote at, so it's totally fine. It makes complete sense.
But I have no idea who dreamt up our district the way it is. It was
Yeah.
long before.
But I like your idea, Kurt, about expressing that it's an opportunity and highlighting those good points and kind of switching it on instead of, oh, it's going to be such a pain in the butt. Here's what is actually going to be happening to benefit stuff. So I really like that. I might direct quote you with some people. So
The other thing is that in the last 5 years or so, and probably even further back, we have realigned quite frequently. The administration looks at it almost annually, transportation does, but usually the shifts are subtle enough that most people don't know about it. So you can, that might be good for you to know though.
I do not.
Hey, they're always evaluating that and try to figure out how do we better utilize our buildings, so.
Well, there was a major study done just within the last 2 years.
Yeah, we did the board asked us to do a study whether we needed to redistrict or not. We came back to the board saying we're going to have to keep looking at the elementary numbers and basically they gave us permission that we need to realign when we need to realign to get the numbers equal. So we're not going over the caps. You see at your board reports monthly, you get a data sheet on our numbers of all of our elementary schools. In the summer, when principals aren't on vacation, every Wednesday we meet. Transportation's involved in registration. They meet with me. We look at all the registrations coming in because it's constant. And I'm holding a couple positions right now that we probably are going to have to reallocate to other buildings because of the amount of registrations that are coming in. So we're always looking to keep the class sizes where they should be, during the summer. That's something that's happening every week.
I noticed year over year we're up 136 between elementary and secondary. I think we had talked about in a previous meeting how our enrollment has been relatively flat for a while, so that's a pretty sizable, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens
if that
next
continues
year.
or not.
Yeah, I appreciate the framework for the options. I think cost will end up determining some of where we land.
Your next presentation.
I'm glad. I'm glad that you're trying to get a pulse from teachers on this. I think that's really important. I am curious to know, though, in terms of educational outcomes, what is research saying about some of these different models? And it's a precise enough question that there's probably not a ton of research that fits perfectly. But I am curious to know, like, is there anything, and that's probably more for administration than the architects, but is there anything that would lead you to believe, hey, this is going to give us better educational outcomes if we go this route or this route? So probably not status quo.
Sure.
But if we're looking at,
I think your initial reaction to your transitions versus your bringing students together sooner. That's the natural one people are going to gravitate to.
So what are the educational benefits in kids staying put for a little while? And the familiarity, I would see some benefit to that, but maybe there's other benefit to.
And then certification of staff in one building, how that 4 to 8 certifications used to be K to 6, 7, 12. You'll find a lot of competing priorities as we get to the analysis. We'll check the most boxes. We'll check the least boxes.
So I would love to see pros and cons from the administration on that particular question as you think about that. And I'm sure you're already talking about those things. You've hit on a few already. So, yeah. Thanks.
Other board members.
I would like to say that obviously from my barbershop and dealing with the public, I think the gaining of trust into what Stephanie was saying, I think the mail out that you put, I've been giving a lot of really good feedback in the shop on that, which I think that's going to be vitally important to have the rest of the community, for all information that they got, on that. I think that's great. So there aren't any questions. When there's questions and people start making up stuff or speculating and whatever else. And so I think we're on the right foot moving forward. So I appreciate you for that, because I think that's what's going to put us in the best position to do these transitions. So
thanks for that feedback on the newsletter.
Well, many of our students transition often just because their parents move from one place to another and they have to change. So as far as transitions are concerned, we would be initiating some transitions, but transitions are part of life.
Sure. They are typically detrimental for kids, though, especially if they're happening frequently. So.
Other board members, comments? This is great discussion, and that's what Committee of the Whole is all about.
I think that we need to continue the effective two-way communication, because you need buy-in from everyone. You need buy-in from the public, you need buy-in from the teachers, you need buy-in from the transportation department. And not everybody's going to be happy. It's a lot of work, but we all need to keep at it. And don't say it out loud if it's not true.
Agreed. On the money.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, board. Great discussion, and the heavy lift will continue.
Just from a strategic standpoint, whenever there's a architectural presentation, there usually will be a finance right after when they're the option heavy lift. John, sorry, you get to go second, not always first.
Good evening, everyone. John Fry from PFM Financial Advisors. Great to be in front of the board and the district again. I've been here many, many years as the PFM is a financial advisor when it comes to issuing bonds for the projects that you ultimately, you're starting that dialogue now. PFM, we're excited to be part of that, and we hear all along the way from this initial dialogue, this initial discussion tonight, the whole way through issuing bonds and getting a settlement on multiple different bond issues, I'm sure in the future, to pay for the projects that we're, that you'll be, contemplating over the next 6 months. So this is just really the start of it. Just to, I've been working with Mrs. Stauffer here just to try to come up with, just to start that dialogue with you. But again, we're here all along the way until the settlement of the funds. So just, I know the board has this in front of them on their screens, but just real quickly on interest rates. I know there's a lot of charts here, but just at the top of the page, just a quick snapshot of what the red line is the historical average of municipal bond yield curve over the last 30 years, and the blue line is current interest rates. So you can see on the longer term, as you get towards the right-hand side of the page, are just below historical averages. Okay, so long-term rates are below historical averages, so it's a good time to borrow. Short-term interest rates on the left-hand side of the page are higher than historical averages, which is why you're benefiting from higher interest earnings on all your investments. So that's good news for the district. And as the Fed, they've raised interest rates to start to try to slow down inflation. So that's why short-term interest rates are high. It's expected over the next 6 to 8 months that the Fed will start to reduce interest rates to get to a more normally shaped yield curve. But we'll continue to monitor that and provide updates as we go along. The next page is really just, we always provide this to the board, just a quick snapshot that my office is always monitoring your debt, but this is from left to right, all the different bond issues that you've issued as a school district over the years. Most of these are refinancings. There's several that are new money, and when you say new money, that's for capital projects like the one we did last fall. But just to note, on the top right-hand side in the blue, that adds up, when from left to right, principal and interest of about $11.7 million. And I highlight that because that's what's, the principal and interest that you owe for the next fiscal year, and we'll show that in a little bit as it relates to future financing plans. And you can see, so that's about $11 to $12 million annually over there on the far right in column 15, and then in about 12 years that drops off significantly. So the district is in a good position as far as its overall debt. Several of the bond issues are eligible to be refinanced. Bond issues aren't eligible all the time to be refinanced. There's certain dates where they're eligible to be refinanced, but the interest rates right now on the ones that are eligible are actually so low that there's no savings. So it's just that's our job, is to monitor those. If interest rates do decline over the next 6 to 12 months, I do expect that we hope to have some refinancing opportunities, similar when your home mortgage has a higher rate than what the current market is. So we're always watching out for that. We just wanted to provide a quick, brief overview or recap on municipal bonds. Local governments and school districts, that's how, so townships, boroughs, counties, and school districts issue debt for their projects is through municipal bonds, which has its own set of rules, regulations via local, state, and federal. So it's different than corporate finance, different than your personal debt. There's certainly a lot of regulations. My firm and myself are registered municipal advisors to provide municipal advice on issuing bonds. So it's very highly regulated and certainly different from other kinds of debt. Again, there's really two different kinds of bonds that are issued, or purposes. New money is what we call for capital projects, and refinancing of debt, which in our world we call refunding of bonds. Number 3 is most frequently, one of the great benefits of a school district and local governments is you're able to issue bonds at a tax-exempt status. for almost all your projects. So that what that does is provides you with a lower interest rates than other entities that issue on a taxable status. Other important note is that you're issuing with a general obligation pledge, which you're telling the investors of your bonds that you're giving your full faith and taxing power to pay for those bonds, and that gives them higher security and higher credit rating, and they feel comfortable that they're going to get their money back, and therefore you get a lower interest rate. The two different types of debt, and number 5, public bond issues. Those are the ones where you're issuing most of the time for larger projects, long-term fixed rate debt. They're more complex, but ultimately they get you the lowest long-term fixed rate. The other type would be bank loans, which we have done for the district. Bank loans, certain times when you're issuing for a small amount, say generally less than $5 million, or more importantly, perhaps for a shorter period of time where you only just want to borrow money for a couple years, because typically while the cost to get the funding might be lower because it's less complex, the interest rate is higher, or the bank might not, most often can't provide a long-term fixed rate. They might provide a variable rate. So most of the time for projects that you're contemplating in the size and scope, we'd be issuing the bond market. And lastly, down at the bottom of the page, as far as timing, as you think about when can you issue bonds for projects, again, because you issue tax-exempt bonds, you have to follow all the IRS regulations. And to borrow tax-exempt and be able to invest it, you need to have what's called reasonable expectations, that at the time you borrow, you have reasonable expectations that you'll spend 85% of the money in 3 years. So that's kind of the big, thing to think about as far as timing. You can borrow before you need the money, but you have to have the reasonable expectations that you're going to spend most of it in 3 years, and that within 6 months you'll have a 5% binding obligation. So those are the kind of things that we'll be watching for as as you continue down the path of what the projects are and when can you borrow. So it's just to start the dialogue and think about scenarios. I know you're going to have a lot of scenarios in front of you over the next 6 months from a planning standpoint, but from a borrowing standpoint, I'll probably say this a lot on this page, but this is just big picture, preliminary, just to get something on paper since there's so many different options. What we worked with on a scenario 1 here is what if the district issued bonds from 2026 to 2028 until your estimated annual debt service is about 10% of your annual operating expenses. So kind of trying to get to an affordability threshold where 10% of your budget is for debt service. Currently, you're at 6%. So you're well below that. So it's giving you that opportunity to borrow. So in that box there in the middle, just to show the math right now, you have about $11.7 million of annual debt service divided by $190 million, just approximately ballpark of your expenditures, that's 6%. So what our office did over the last several weeks is we just looked at how much could you borrow over a certain period of time until the 6% goes up to 10% of your budget. And we're getting about $135 million of additional bonds that you'd still be at 10% or below that threshold. So again, just, these will be refined multiple times. We can do it in different phases and timing and tranches, but just will give you a ballpark. Number 2 there, just again for informational purposes. So that first kind of was to show, that where can we go and still be below that 10% threshold. About $135 million is our current estimate. But a lot of times I get clients and school districts particularly say, what is our maximum by state law that we borrow, just to kind of give the bookends. And so just wanted to provide that math. It's a formula that's provided in the State Debt Act where they take an average annual revenue over the last couple years that's recurring. It's about $160 million times 2.25% or 225%. So what that gets you to is your borrowing base, and this changes every year, but your borrowing base is about $361 million. And then you subtract out the principal that you already have on your books, which is about $129 million. So currently, right now, your state debt capacity is an additional $232 million. So again, not trying to throw that out that that's what is going to be planned, but just as a as a informational purposes, because that's a question you might get. But again, just the big picture, and we'll continue to monitor your any refinancing scenarios. So just wrapping up before we take any questions and discussion, on this page 6, I know there's a lot of numbers on here, but I'll try to kind of get to the punchline. On the far left, what we try to do in column 13 is showed your estimated annual operating expenses of about $190 million currently. And again, we can change this assumption, but in that column, all we did is add, going down that column, 3% a year. If your expenses grow at 3% a year, there's your expenditures, and you see obviously it grows. And what we did then is try to back into the formula that I talked about. If you look, right now, if you take the existing debt service on the far left, which is $11.7 million, divided by your operating expenses in column 13, you get 6%. So how much could you borrow over that time period to get to that 10% cap? And again, it's about $135 million of principal. In this instance, we staged it over 3 years of $45 million in each of 26, 27, and 28. Again, once you come up with the timing of your, it's kind of the tail wagging the dog here of me telling when we're going to borrow. The architects will tell us when they need the money, when our shovel's getting in the dirt, and we'll design your financing plan around that, as well as tax code, interest rate environment, all those things will impact. So I'm sure we'll have more steps than this, but just again, big picture, just to kind of show a phase-in of debt. And probably the takeaway then is in column 12 in the green with the red box around it, is your total debt service would grow from $11.7 million up to a little over $21 million over that time period. Again, we might be able to phase it in over time, try to help smooth that in. But Mr. Norcross made a great point earlier in tonight's meeting as far as the takeaway should be that your debt service will likely go up by a significant amount over the several years, and planning ahead is crucial for all Pennsylvania school districts with the Act 1 index limitations that everyone is under. So I was really happy to hear that is in everybody's thoughts, because to get projects completed successfully, you need to plan ahead. So that's kind of the reason why why we're here tonight, just to start that initial thought of how much money gets you to 10%. But again, that'll all come from the other side, telling what are the buildings and reconfigurations, and we'll refine and design our financing plan off of that. So I'll stop now. I know I was rambling on, but happy to take any questions.
I'll go first a little bit if I can, and I will. But so last year, and Mrs. Stauffer, I might need help with this, but we did a borrowing last year, roughly $10 million. How much of that have we committed so far? This goes to what Mr. Fry just said about you have 3 years to expend that money.
Well, actually, on the slide, should put the microphone on, I guess. Actually, Mr. Norcross, right now, we have not committed any of that money. You'll see further on the agenda, we're going to seek to reclass some of the projects that we paid for out of the capital reserve, so that we are attempting to hit that threshold that we need to.
Yeah. And that's a good segue. If we can go back, whoever's running the screen. I love slide 3. And Mr. Fry's tired of me saying this, but I'm going to just bore him again. But when we've historically, and Chambersburg School District isn't alone. I mean, I don't darn near a lot of public entities do it, but this thing called wraparound financing. If you look on slide 3, take a look at column 11 is a perfect example of it. So it's only like $200,000 a year debt service, and then bam, the last 4 years it's $2 million. So it's a 10, multiplier times 10 when you get to the end. And this wraparound, it's all designed to just keep that debt level on the far right column. But the issue I just asked Mrs. Stauffer about, column 14, that's what a level debt service looks like, the one we did last year, where, you know, it's right around that 690,000 plus or minus every year. And the longer, I'm a firm believer, the longer the board can continue something like 14, the benefit to this starts around 2037, 2038. This board has had a lot of discussions about cost per pupil, how much we spend per pupil. Can you imagine what would happen when your debt service goes from 10 million to $1 million? That's $9 million more dollars for students. And when you do level and you plan ahead, that gives you that opportunity for, I won't be sitting here in 2036, but somebody else can hopefully reap the benefits of that if the board can continue. Another one of my comments, and it goes to the 3-year, I mentioned it when we voted on the budget earlier, this X plus Y, the 3 plus 1. Just because we did the plus 1, last year we did borrow, and Mr. Stauffer said how we're going to repurpose it. Just because we did do a plus 1, we don't have to spend that. We can just send that to capital reserve, and what that does, that plus 1 is about $1 million a year. I think it's $967,000 or something like that, if I remember from previous. But if you go to slide 6, so in 2024, the plus 1, it's 967, I'm gonna say $1 million. In 2025, it's another $1 million. In 2026, it's another $1 million. If we keep with the plus 1 over the next 3 years, when we get to step 1, we're gonna have that debt service in the bank. Because in these first 3 years, we're just gonna send it over to capital reserve and we'll spend that, maybe spend it. But then when it comes time to make that payment in 2027 for step 1, instead of that $3 million going to capital reserve, is now going to go to debt service. And so if we can continue what we've done, step 1, the board will cover step 1 by the time we get there in 3 years. Other comments, discussions?
My only other comment is there's potential historic decisions at the state level around the funding formula. So the reason we're being a little more aggressive with potential is, first of all, your work in the past to have a good fund balance and have available funds in the future, piggybacked with the idea that we could get substantial state money if they deliver, we could move on plans like this. So I normally don't like to overpromise and underdeliver, but this is a very unique time in my lifetime where there's a potential for significant state dollars. So we're being a little more aggressive, and hopefully we can just phase out the master plan over a longer time if we don't get as much state money. But we need a plan here in front of us, so it's a little more aggressive than typical, but I think it's all for the right reasons.
Mr. Fry, I'll ask one other question. I love pictures. You know, engineers can't say anything without drawing a picture. Say the same thing about financial advisors. But on slide 2, that chart, and the district has reaped a lot of benefits over refinancing, you know, between, you know, 2015 through 2022. So there probably isn't as much low-hanging fruit. But you mentioned in the next couple months, as the bond curves hopefully start looking what we've been spoiled seeing past 5-6 years. Do you see any opportunities for refinancing, or are we?
I do. As far as low-hanging fruit, I mean, you're right. We had significant savings. I mean, I think we saved $20 million over the last 15 years. But that's, I mean, let's face it, there was a pandemic which put interest rates at basically 0, and we took advantages of as many times as we could do that. And so we have all your debt now is at that chart. I mean, basically, if you look all the page 3, all that debt is issued on average less than 4%. Some well below that, some at 2%, 3%. So we're watching it because, as Mr. Norcross said, towards the left-hand side of the page, most of that debt's pretty short. So when the Fed starts to reduce interest rates, if the economy starts to slow down in the next year, maybe those, you know, like I said, if they're 3.5%, we do need a reduction in short-term interest rates, but we'll be all over it. I don't think it'll be huge savings like we've seen in the past, but certainly we'll take advantage of everything we can. So I would think, yes, I would think there will be refinancings.
Okay. Okay,
All right,
thank you,
very good.
Mr. Fry.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to section 5, consent agenda. Go through these like I did last month, and we can take as much time as we need to. For items 5.01 through 5.13, these items are proposed to go on the consent agenda at our regular meeting at the end of the month, and at which time, you know, they would be consent. We'd vote on all of them at once without any discussion. So with that, I'll start with the administration team. If there's any of those 13 items that you would like to maybe expand upon now, and then I'll ask the same of board members if there's any of those 13 items that you would like to expand upon. And yeah, I'm going to go first again, Kurt, if you don't mind. I mean, I have the mic, why not? But 5.05, just a little bit of a self-indulgent here, a gob, you know, and Mr. Fry left. I had to send a note to Tammy earlier with a question mark on gob. You know, if you're from the Alleghenies, a gob is what we call whoopie pie. And you know, here, when you go to Sheets and you walk in and say, what's a gob? You say, that's a whoopie pie. Well, if you're from the Alleghenies or West, you say whoopie pie, and they say, well, that's a gob. Well, here, gob is a general obligation bond. And so I appreciate Mrs. Stauffer advising me that a gob tonight is not a whoopie pie.
It is not, no.
Mr. Whitman.
Something new is 5.13. I'm sorry, 5.12, reinstate a second teacher at Children's Aid Society. I just wanted to bring this one up because this is when the LIU had the Children's Aid Society, the education, they had 2 teachers. Numbers went down roughly when we transitioned over to the district. Numbers are back up, and their grade levels are from elementary to high school. We now have 20 plus students roughly, and there is a need to add a second teacher. It will be zero cost to the district because we will be billing out to the school districts where these students are coming from all over the state. So just wanted to point that part out, that even though we need a second teacher, our business office will be billing out for those students. And sometimes you like to hear about reinstating students. We are reinstating another student from one of our AEDY placements. So they have done well enough that they can come back to Chambersburg, so that's a good thing.
One for me to highlight, Dr. Long, could you talk about 5.09, just in short? That's girls wrestling.
Sure, this is the fastest growing sport in the nation, and we've had girls wrestle through club for the last few years, and every year the amount of girls have increased. So Mr. Kimple, two Sean's, came to me and said that his coaches would really like to start this because they feel that they have 15 to 25 girls ready to go for next year. So what he's going to do is provide a coach, one of the wrestling coaches right now, to help out, and then see how well the team progresses, and then in the next budget possibly ask for a coach for the girls wrestling team. But this is exciting. It's also going to help out with the Title IX.
Dr. Long, along those same lines, and I'm a football fanatic, and football season's about ready to start, but you see a lot about ladies flag football, and more clubs nationally with that. Where's Pennsylvania with anything?
That's rising very quickly as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that Mr. Kimple has talked about that. Wrestling is just so hot right now, so flag football is coming as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and back to the wrestling, so will there be a Chambersburg team that can compete with other teams throughout the
Yes.
area?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of
That's
that.
what he's requesting, is to start a PIAA sanctioned team.
Very cool.
Do we know how many teams are already doing it now? Just curious. How many other high schools maybe?
I do not. I can find out and send it to you.
They had
but-
their first state championship this year, I believe. So I don't think every league has enough teams to have a league, but they had their first state championship.
Correct.
Yeah.
There was a young lady relatively close that won a state medal, gold, was it? Adams County, somewhere?
Not from, I don't know about girls, boys.
No,
We have a
there was
girl here that's doing quite well
Yeah.
in Chambersburg, in club, like she's going all over the country.
Great. Any board members have any questions on any of the other 5.01 through 5.13? Okay, they will all move forward to consent agenda. And just a note, you know, if something comes up between now and the board meeting and we need to separate it, let us know. We'll try to do it ahead of time. It helps Mrs. Stauffer with the minutes and the meeting when we get to it.
And with 3 weeks between this one and the next approval, there'll be a lot added with asterisks in July, at the end of the month.
Education and services, Mr. Bigger, do you want to go through all these, or
Use the-
most of these
use the
are
same
just
process.
agreements and contracts, a lot of them are renewals. So I guess we'll start with the administration, if there's any of the items 6.01 through 6.09 that you want to elaborate on or provide additional information. These will be individual items on the regular board meeting?
Now, what we're trying to do for you, since the consent agenda was so long, is make two sections of consent. One would be your traditional and the other be under ed services, so you could chunk it a little better. So they're both somewhat consent agenda. Treat them the same way.
Yeah. So to that point, 601 to 609, tonight is a great opportunity to elaborate on them and then board members to ask for more information or questions.
My question is, at the next meeting, will we then pass them as a group as well?
Yeah,
Is that what you're?
it'll be two groups versus one big group. It chunks it for you a little better. Ed services versus some of the finance.
There were about 40 of them last meeting
Yeah,
or something
yeah, it was a little
crazy.
too big to do at one time.
That was a record. Gold medal.
I have three that I'll just talk about. Most of them that are under me are, yearly. But the three that I'll talk about, the Migrant Ed Summer Program is coming back after a several-year absence. I think it pretty much left us around COVID, and it's coming back. It's going to be at Ben Chambers for a couple weeks this summer. That's 6.05. 6.07, we feel that we have 3 open positions for speech teachers, and we're hopefully going to fill those. If we can fill those, then we wouldn't need to subcontract, but we need to get an agreement, to at least make sure our kids are getting the services. So you may see a couple of these coming forward, like 6.07. And then 6.08, because of we're having a second flex day. So Mr. Bigger, myself, and Tina and Mark and Tammy have worked with the CAEA to create a flex day MOU. So our teachers are going to be getting 2 flex days this summer. If they do one flex day that they pick, they get the Tuesday after Thanksgiving off. And then we, as the administration, like building principals, will assign a second flex day to their teachers, or a suggested flex day that they take. If they choose to do that, then they will get January 3rd off. So we have more PD offerings this year because we have 2 flex days that they can take advantage of. I just wanted to let you know that MOU is coming.
And I have one dealing with the high school. It's the ATSI plan that we have to turn in each year. So that's the proposed plan, and that will be sent in July then, or at the end of June, to the state. And then what goes along with that then is also the LIU services that the high school needs. We also have the magnet school that's on TSI and 2 elementary schools. So I'm sure that there'll be something that they will be doing with the IU possibly, or another consulting firm, in order to get them up to speed with what the state requires.
Board members, any questions?
I just want to make a comment, what Dr. Long said. if you did not take the time to look at the ATSI and some of the data that's in there, you really need to take a look at that, because it will open your eyes to things that you could really use whenever we're thinking about how we want to move forward. It's a very intensive and eye-opening document, and if you haven't gotten the chance to look over that, I highly recommend that you go through it page by page and really absorb what you're seeing in those pages, because I know I did, and some of the information on there was not surprising, and some of it was very surprising, and some of it was a little disheartening, some of it not so much, you know. So there were some good, like, they have strengths and weaknesses, but some of the performance levels and how they have it broken down into subgroups, I think will really benefit us as a board to dig into that and take a look at that as we think about how we're moving forward into all of our educational planning for the district. So just a thought, if you didn't get a chance to look at that.
I have a question on 6.09, and I know, Chris, about the exchange students. Anything special? And I know I had forwarded a message to you that I received.
Right.
Just a funny conversation here, you know. You have to
This
humor
isn't the
this.
one that couldn't find a partner, right? This is they have a institution supporting them. Yeah,
This isn't the call I took.
that's correct. It's not.
Okay, yeah. I took a call, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and, you know, they started they were this organization that helped place exchange students, and they started the conversation by telling me about how experienced they were. And then they went on to call me they were calling me because they thought I was the superintendent. So I got a chuckle out of that, and I sent them to Chris, and I sent him a text that they were calling me.
Did you say thanks, Ed?
Yeah, I thought, wow, that's a great organization. They think I'm the superintendent. Wow. Okay, those 9 items will be a second consent agenda item vote at the regular meeting. Policy and legislation, 8.01, second reading. Policy 903, public comments in board meeting. That'll be the final vote on that second reading. We talked about a couple minor
Yep, they're in green,
items
reflected in there in green.
at the first reading. So, any additional thoughts, comments on that this evening?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Bring your attention back to paragraph under authority, item 6. Currently reads, any district parent student, period, which is probably just a typo, but I think it should read something like this. And a parent of a district student or district student. Because a parent of a student may live outside the district, but he's still a parent of someone here. So if the district, you know.
Any
yeah.
district parent of a student.
Yeah, but the way it's written now is clearly
it's
not
of a,
right,
yeah, yeah.
so, you know, just clarifying that. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussions? Okay, that'll go forward for second reading at the next meeting. Item 10.01, privilege of the floor. Members of the audience are invited to comment on agenda and/or non-agenda items. Okay. None there. As I mentioned last meeting, we talked about, for item 11, new business discussion only. This evening, we would reopen the discussion on the broadcasting of the board meetings. You know, a little history, COVID timeframe. I guess post-COVID, we started videoing them when it was just board members in here. And then through the office renovations, obviously when we were in the auditorium, we stopped videoing. And then at that time, the board just elected we would continue with the audio recording and no video recording. So the board, I've had some board members ask to discuss this, bring it up if the board wanted to change direction on any of our current procedures. So I'll open it up
First of all, there is video, but the video is of what's on the screen. And so it's not a question of audio only or audio and video. It's a question as to whether or not the board members are, and/or the public, whenever they come to the privilege of the floor, are videoed. And I don't think that the purpose is to display the board members and their faces and their actions and so forth. I think, because I have watched our board meetings, both the old way, it was very randomly scanning the board members. It was not a highly professional looking video. When you look at what the video is now, it is much more professional looking than it used to be. And I personally am not here for a public display of my persona. That's not what I see as the goal. It's communication of information. And the current way, showing what's on the screen, provides better information for the person who is just watching at home. I don't know how many of you have watched the YouTube display, either the old way or the current way, but it is definitely an improvement. If our goal is to display ourselves, then we need to go back to the old way. But if the purpose is to communicate information to people who are not here, the current method is much more effective. And if people want their friends to see them on display, tell the people to come to the board meeting and they can see the board member or the person in the audience in person. I just find that it's much better the way it is now. I think it is very important that the microphones are used effectively by everybody who's speaking, but that's reminded periodically whenever somebody isn't using it. But as I say, I'm not personally serving for personal display, recognition, whatever. If that's the goal, then we ought to go back to the old way, but that's not my goal.
I feel like that's a little bit short-sighted to it's either one or the other, like you either want to be on display or you want to give information. I watch Greencastle's board meetings and they do both. Too. They put up the information when that person's giving the presentation, and then when the board is having discussions, they get to see how the board interacts with each other. And I think that there's a lot of people who would be more inclined to tune into meetings online if they could see people in addition. And this is just conversations that I've had in the community. They like to see the body language. Are we sitting back and uninterested? Are we on our phones? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Because body language has a lot to do with how we are selling ourselves to other people. So I think maybe there can be a compromise. I know you say about you don't want it to be all over the place. I agree. I've seen where it's just a stationary camera and it's kind of off center. Like it would be over kind of where Kurt is, for example, the one. And I just use Greencastle because I've watched them several times when they were going through the LERTA situation and stuff. And it's there, and whenever they're getting a presentation, the information's up on the board so they see, the people at home see what we're seeing, and then when it comes for discussion time about budget or whatever else, then you get to see the board interacting in the conversations. So maybe we can try to compromise and get what you like about it, which is the information part, but still show the human element, not like to parade ourselves that we're some good board, but just so that people can put faces and names. So if they see us out in public, they're like, hey, I heard your comment, or hey, this, or hey, that, you know, so they know how that kind of goes. So that's kind of where I'm at in my thinking.
I'm the one who asked, and I appreciate you putting this on the agenda, to discuss this, because I've had several people approach me about about having the videos back on. I know there are people who have can't hear or can't discern who's speaking, and a lot of times when we speak, we don't obviously state who we are. This is Mr. Walker or whoever, and so if they don't know who's speaking, they can sometimes tell through the video by they see my hands moving or maybe doing something like, oh, that's Mr. Walker who's speaking or what have you. But I also think that it for posterity's sake, I think that we're elected officials. I think that we have to we rise and fall on the things that we do. I think that for future board members also, that they can see how businesses run, get a visual. I'm a visual learner, so whenever I see videos and I learn more off of that, and I think too, it holds us to a certain level of accountability when there's only one or two people in the room, but knowing that the video is on, I still need to maintain a certain decorum and statesmanship, and so I think it's vitally important. This is the information age. I think all the information and all of the technology that we have now, I say, why not? Why take it away? We were doing it before. Don't take away from the experience of those people who may not be able to attend the meetings to actually see and feel like they participated rather than just listened in on the radio. So, and like I said, I've had people come up to me, several of my customers and some other people mention that they would like to see the video again. So.
Yeah, my position on this is I like the way the public can express their opinion as to what's needed. And I have yet to hear anybody say, Mike, we just don't see enough of you. So for me, I don't need the attention, so I get where Faye's coming from. But I also agree with Stephanie and Lance that the public deserves to see how we behave, how we operate, our dynamics as a team. And I like to hope that when they look at this board and the leadership, they'll see what I tell people when people ask me, Mike, how is your experience on the school board going, all 5 or 6 months of it? I look them in the eye and I say, I couldn't have a better experience thus far. This is a real team. We've got a leader. I don't know, we're making progress. And we're telling the public about it. And to Chris's credit, warts and all, he puts it out there, and this is where we're going to improve. And there's a team here sitting against the wall over there, Rogues Gallery, that they're making it happen too. And so I couldn't be happier, and if people want to see us working this way, let's bring it. That's how I feel.
I'd just like to say a few things on this. One of the things that's really been great about this board is I really believe we're working as a team of 10. And Lance, when you said there that, they need to see that we're not on our phones and stuff, I haven't seen any unprofessional behavior by this board whatsoever. I don't think I have to have a camera on me to know that I'm not going to sit here and be on my phone, that I'm going to be paying attention to, because that's what I'm expected to do. I think sometimes when it's just the way we're doing it right now, it's not glorifying any particular person on the board. It's not pinpointing any particular person, because now we're working as a team of 10. I don't know if they really need to know that Sherry Diller said this, or Sherry Diller had a smirk on her face, or sometimes I don't think we need that kind of stuff going out, and sometimes it really does, and it gets misinterpreted. I think hearing the comments, hearing us work together the way it is right now, I think is phenomenal. That's just my feeling. I don't need the glorification of having my picture on the screen. And I don't know why it doesn't really matter if Sherry Diller said this or if Ben Raver said this. People are welcome to come and talk to me anytime about anything. So, I'm very happy with the way it is.
Others? Ben?
I'll just say, yeah, I think I'm fine either way. I agree with Faye's point. Like, I think it's more important to have the information up there. I have no problem being on the screen as well. If it's beneficial, if people can recognize who we are. I also think if people are listening regularly, they probably are learning our voices, right? So maybe it is a bigger deal for some people than I realize. I think my favorite model might be what Stephanie's talking about, where you would have both options, right? Where it's going to switch back and forth. But I have a practical question. Is that even an option for us? Do we have the technology for that? Do we have somebody that could make the switch back and forth? And then at what point does that actually take away from the meeting? If somebody's focused on transitioning back and forth rather than making sure that the most important information is on this, I don't know. I don't have the answers to that question. But obviously we have cameras, but are they? Yeah. So and this is just not that big of a deal for me either way.
For me, when you decide, use the mic since everybody's, when you decide, then we'll put together the plan to do that moving forward, the capabilities. I know there are cameras in here. I know it's possible. So I'll wait till decide. If there's board direction, then we'll get it set up.
There's one other comment I heard from some other person that said sometimes people listen in and they don't recognize voices, who we are. And I get that. But I guess one solution to that would be simply at the beginning of every board meeting, starting with Region 1. Hi, I'm so-and-so from Region 1.
Or when you speak, identify yourself. This is
yourself,
when you're
right.
speaking, or when you're recognized by the chair.
Well, I'm not suggesting every time you open your mouth, you gotta say who you are again, because that would get cumbersome. I'm just saying, at the beginning of the meeting, this is who I am, this is my region, now you hear my voice. If you can't figure that out, maybe you should take a nap.
I don't even know that that's that big of a deal, because if people are tuning into the meeting, they might not necessarily tune in right at 7, you know? So
okay, that's a good point.
I think it's a good idea, but is that actually a game changer?
Probably not.
I don't know. I think we're not the Supreme Court.
Praise God.
But with that being said, and I get it, they're not on film and their stuff is all audio, right? But every other board, just about in this country, it's there. You have the video, whether it's in the Senate and Congress and other school board. How many school board meetings have we seen? Constantly. I think the more you have, the more transparency seeming that this isn't something out of the ordinary. It's not like something we all of a sudden we want. And to me, it's not about attention. Like, hey, look at me, I'm on the board. I think it's about transparency, more or less. But
I think some people use it as a divisive thing too. You know, they'll see, well, okay, let's see what, McKee's doing over here, what Stephanie's doing over here, whatever. And some will try to use it, and along the way, I think a lot of times, of course, my voice is distinct anyhow, but most people pick up who we are. But if we have to say our names, hey, so be it. So.
I just add my comments, and then I'm going to turn it back to the board just for a little bit of, when I look back at item 8.01 that we're going to vote on as our second reading here in the next meeting, policy 903. And when we first started discussing policy 903, one of the comments or impetuses behind 903 was the concern that a generic statement that was being read at the beginning of public comment would dissuade people from wanting to make public comment. So, because we were making a generic comment that was specific to no topic, no individual, but again, the conversation was, well, that might dissuade people from public comment. Well, if we want to not dissuade people from public comment, I don't think we want to show their face on a video. So I would ask the board to think about, if you don't want to discourage them by making a generic comment, are you not going to discourage them by, oh my gosh, they're going to stand up and you're going to show their face on the video, and it's going to go on YouTube for the world to see. So I asked the board to think about that. Mr. Rayber brings up a good point, resources. I guess I'd question, we talk about, pupil spending, and, does that take another member of the staff to operate the video part of the meeting? And, is that really what we want to do?
I don't think it would. I think it's just a practical question. Is
Okay.
that how complicated, how much of a
So the
headache
question is, and again, this is a 3-step process, and this is step 1 at Committee of the Whole. We discussed this as a board. And then the decision tonight is, do we want to move it forward as a voting item or a change in policy that we wouldn't want to continue with? Or do we want to just stay with the status quo? That's the question for the board tonight. Now that we've had the initial discussion, do we want to move this forward?
I'll just say one more thing on my part. Just in a matter of 10 minutes, I've kind of like went from one side of this to the other, and I'm not sure where I am right now.
Sure.
But I do know this much, that kind of like since our new superintendent started, he's been beginning to put out communication, messages to the world, our community, that this is what's going on. And I don't know that we should be any different from that in so many ways. And I would agree, though, some people might be very discouraged to get up there and, say a few words, and then all of a sudden, everybody knows I said that. I know how you feel, people. But they should be an option. They should be, I guess, allowed to see, maybe not be shown. But I'll go either way with the board on this one, because I see feelings are strong on both sides, and I can see the value of both arguments. So
I would encourage board members to go to the YouTube site and view some of the old videos and then some of the more recent ones, so that you can see that comparison. Perception becomes reality in the mind of the beholder. And when I pick up my phone to put a date in that I hear that something is going to happen in a school, nobody knows why I'm using my phone, why I have it in my hand, but I try to attend many functions that I hear about at the board meeting, but somebody can perceive that, oh, she's on her phone texting her whoever, and so on. I actually had an email some months back. I deleted it, I'm sure it's not there, but somebody commented the board meeting was over. We were on the last item. I closed my computer because I don't look up at the screen. I look at my computer screen. I can read it much easier than up there. Somebody sent me an email criticizing the fact that I had closed my computer before the meeting was over. Now, that was so petty, but it's an example of that perception that I was disinterested because I closed my computer. Well, what I was needing to see on my computer had ended.
Well,
so
if what I'm hearing here tonight, I'm hearing a lot of people are neutral on it, and maybe some, we're not going to vote tonight, but I'll go out on a limb here. This is not an item I'm willing to die on my sword on, but I'm happy the way things are. But if the board wants to move forward and change this, then, but what I'm hearing tonight, the sense I'm hearing, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, that I think the majority sound okay with the status quo. But if I'm misreading
I would
that,
just
please
like to go on record as saying that the reason that I brought it up and was looking for the compromise is because of things that were brought to me from the public. I am here to relay information that is brought to the public. Whether we do it or not is irrelevant. But when I have people come to me and say, it'd be nice to see you guys, it'd be nice to see you guys, it doesn't matter to me whether we do it or not. I am relaying information from the people that elected me, the people in the district, telling you guys what I've heard. This isn't me saying we need to be on video. And it's just a little, I don't know what the exact word is, so I'll hedge it a little. But to go from, if you think we should be on video, it's self-aggrandizing, that's a little bit disingenuous. And I really would ask that we not be so quick to jump one way or the other and understand the motives and the behind the scenes information and where it is coming from as we move forward as a board together. Because those kind of assumptions and word choices can be the things that dissolve the good working chemistry that we have. If we're not careful in how we speak and the words that we choose, whether directed at people individually or indirectly or unintentionally, perhaps. So I'm good either way. We could do video, not do video. I was just agreeing with and saying what I had heard from other people as well and trying to find that compromise.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Personally, I would much rather not have video. I'm trying to think about what is best for our community, what's best for the district. I have no desire to be on YouTube. and I would imagine most of us feel that way, right? I understand the younger generation, maybe that's becoming more normal. When I was a kid, that was not a thing. And I think many of you are older than me, so.
And I have to say,
from a personal standpoint, well, and I'm not saying that, yeah, I just think, yeah, I think some of that's generational though, too. And I feel like I'm old enough that I'm like, no, YouTube is unappealing to me.
I got a couple questions for Mr. Bigger then, before I get out of here. One is, do you imagine someday having a capability where the video technology is really, really professional for you to take advantage of as a superintendent and have your school district take advantage of that capability? Is that a way you'd see us going?
I mean, it's already in the room. You can look up and see cameras. They're just not on and functioning. So yeah, it's certainly capable. I think you just have to ask your board as this isn't my decision. This is the board's decision.
No, but
I'm in the camera enough. I do posts I don't want to do, but I do it because it's for the reasons why some of you suggested. So yeah, I think the board, what I've struggled with my entire career is board governance is about running the business of the school. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're here for. Just do that. That's all you have to do. Yeah. If it becomes part of the production of why people focus on topics, we've lost our purpose. Mm-hmm. Business meetings are boring. Absolutely. They're intended to be boring. Right. Listening to PFM talk is the last thing anybody wants to do. So my point to that is this shouldn't be the platform on which people listen to the majority of what they hear. It's my job to go communicate the major issues. Mm-hmm. Yes, if there's a topic of significant substance that's around policy and governance and politics related to the board, certainly you're going to take the responsibility for that. But 95% of what we do here, I go around with. And I go communicate that in newsletters and follow up. So is it capable? Is it possible? Yes. But I've always believed people that really want to know what's going on should attend this 50-seat audience and watch. That's always been my belief because that's where you learn it all. So, but I'm okay either way, wherever you end up.
And the only other question I would pose, I guess, to Faye, in all fairness, let's not judge how a video production can be if in fact we're going to use what was used before, which is really, really crappy. Right. We're not going to do that again. We're going to do something better, I would hope. Maybe we're not there right now, but someday it'll be here and it'll be that way. But you know, we can plan for it or not.
As board leadership, you know, the sense again, what I'm sensing here tonight is there's not a strong, you know, majority preference one way or the other. And I think to move this along, I mean, we can continue to discuss it. I don't go to bed till midnight anyway, but, you know, and Mrs. Stauffer, you know, your budget presentations are better than PFM, so. Yeah, we won't worry about that. But, so I don't know, what I'm hearing tonight is that we continue with the status quo, and if we want to revisit it, maybe down the road, I think we revisit it later.
I was gonna say, the first time you bring something up, everybody responds and reacts, and then you go back and think about it. So if it comes back up under board goals or board development, perhaps that's the place you talk about it again. The first time you hear it's generally the time you don't want to make a decision.
I don't want to be the last word, however.
Mrs. Gauss, have the last word, please.
In the olden days, local newspapers would come to school board meetings.
Oh, absolutely.
And they would cover the school board meetings, and you would know what was said at the school board meetings. That's no longer the case. So while we're doing a great job of communicating with families, parents, students, maybe we're not reaching the public who are the taxpayers. So I think any and all method of communication, however we do it, needs to go out as much as it can. So maybe we should invite the local newspaper, oh, there isn't one, to our school board meetings.
I will say Amber does listen and creates articles from listening, and she likes to do it on her time outside this 7 o'clock time frame.
Can I just say one, this is quick, I'm not.
Okay, Mr. Walker gets the last
I mean,
word.
we are,
Yeah, I'm not on video, so I can close it.
we are here for education. And we know that there are different styles of learning. We want to educate the public at the same time. So if you're an auditory learner, that's great for you. If you're like me and you need maybe auditory and visual, that much better. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Great discussion tonight, board. And you've got another sense of the heavy lift. So with that, our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.